Pay attention to this sound. Okay, enough. This sound was made to get your attention. Did it work for you? Because it did for me. And I'm quite attentive and also a bit confused. Why exactly would someone play this sound on purpose? What you just heard is the audio header of the United States Emergency Alert System. When some kind of emergency is about to happen, like the impact of a hurricane, this sound plays 3 times to indicate the emergency. The sound message is replicated by various registered communication channels for this purpose, including radio and television channels. The function of the audio header is to capture the attention of anyone listening to the voice message that follows immediately after. It explains the details of the emergency, and after this explanation, another sound plays 3 times indicating the end of the message. For example, although it manages to capture your attention, perhaps the audio header captures attention in the wrong way, or at least that's what the most recent studies on sound and psychology indicate. Sounds can be much more powerful than we imagined in the 1980s, which is when this alert was developed.
Hey, Pedro here. This video you are watching was originally in Portuguese, my native language. This is the attempt of our team to translate it to English, and I sincerely hope you enjoy it. Your feedback is extremely important to us. Now, back to the video.
On the physical side, sound is a mechanical wave that propagates through variations in atmospheric pressure. A sound produces repeated vibrations that cause slight variations in atmospheric pressure, and these vibrations propagate, carrying the sound with them. For example, you have vocal cords in your throat. When you speak, the muscles of the vocal cords make them vibrate. And the vibrations of the vocal cords make the air in your throat vibrate. And these vibrations are modified as they pass through your mouth. The vibrations that exit your throat through your mouth propagate around you through the atmospheric air at the speed of sound, approximately 340 meters per second. And along the way, these vibrations can reach another person's ear. The shape of the ear is similar to that of an antenna. It focuses the sound vibrations from the atmosphere onto your eardrum. And the eardrum is a sensitive membrane that captures the sound vibration and transmits these vibrations to your inner ear. And inside, a series of bones, cartilages, and membranes transform the mechanical vibrations into an electrical signal that is transmitted to your brain through the cochlear nerves. Your brain processes the electrical signals and compares the signals from each ear to determine the location of the sound's origin and generate the sensory perception of sound. This is the physiological and physical explanation of the act of listening and understanding what you are hearing. But beyond sensory perception, sound can also evoke emotions and sensations. The way you react to a sound depends on a series of biological and personal factors. For example, the human brain is calibrated by evolution to pay attention to sounds that resemble a baby's cry. Laughter and the voices of people we like can bring a sense of calm. Sounds associated with trauma can trigger and make people relive those traumas. The sound of a morning alarm can cause deep irritation. The psychological aspect of sound is powerful. Even more so because we cannot choose to turn off our ears. We are forced to hear sounds that happen near us, unlike other senses. A light alarm can be ignored if you are looking in another direction or if you are behind a wall. But a sound loud enough will go through a wall and will be heard by anyone nearby. This makes sounds excellent ways to communicate information that should not be ignored. In fact, the American emergency sound header I showed at the beginning of this video is intended to be hard to ignore. The frequencies used in the header are right in the middle of human auditory capacity. And they can also be heard by people with hearing problems. And as you noticed, the sound is not harmonic like musical notes are, and it tries to borrow what it can from sounds that humans find uncomfortable, like a baby's cry. This sound wants to grab your attention. It wants to alert and irritate you, and that might not be ideal for an emergency alarm, but we will understand why this is better with music. Music causes emotional reactions. The exact reaction depends on the music and who is listening to it. You probably have songs you love and songs you prefer to avoid. And these same emotional reactions can be practically used to improve or worsen your daily life. Being a bit simplistic, we can classify emotional reactions to sounds and music on a 2-dimensional graph. The vertical direction represents the arousal caused by the music. The higher on the graph, the more exciting the sound is, and the lower, the calmer it is. The horizontal axis measures the emotional response. The left side represents negative emotions and the right side represents positive emotions. Which songs and musical styles are in each part of the graph varies from person to person. For example, I find Radiohead stimulating and fun, and on the other hand, I find death metal somewhat unpleasant. But again, this is totally subjective. Feel free to disagree in the comments. What's interesting is that different types of sounds have different emotional effects. Stimulating sounds have a measurable effect on the nervous system. And because of this, listening to lively music makes your body prepare to move. On the other hand, lively music with negative emotions makes you irritated, like listening to loud music on the bus at 6 in the morning just because someone refuses to use headphones. On the other hand, less stimulating music can lead to positive emotions in the form of relaxation or even sadness. And yes, sadness can be something positive for a song. Many songs are intentionally sad and are well received precisely because of that. There is research indicating that listening to sad music affects the production of certain hormones that are connected with stress regulation, such as prolactin. The results are still quite preliminary, but they indicate that music can help in emotional regulation at a physiological level. And this is not even close to the only utility of music. Upbeat music significantly improves your athletic performance. Listening to music that excites you increases how fast you can run, or how heavy the weights you can lift at the gym are. The exact mechanisms are still being studied. One of the hypotheses of how this happens is that music generates a sense of well-being that delays the body's fatigue response. And this allows your body to continue performing at high capacity for longer before the internal fatigue alerts trigger. A third example of music use is listening to music while working or studying. There is no evidence that listening to music while studying or working directly improves performance. But there is evidence that music improves the overall sense of well-being during long-term efforts, as long as the music is not a distraction or irritation. In other words, listening to music while you study can create a positive emotional association with studying. And this might make it easier for you to tolerate studying for longer without getting tired or irritated, which indirectly increases your efficiency. So yes, that lo-fi playing softly in the background can have positive effects on your long-term performance. This doesn't mean you need to listen to music all the time to experience these effects. Listening to music you like during breaks between focused work or study sessions can have a similar effect. The map of the effect of music is not just a map of how music affects emotions, but a map of how music can affect physiological responses. Sounds can change the types of chemicals actively moving through your body, how good you are at lifting weights, or the types of thoughts that cross your mind. The right sound can force specific emotional reactions or communicate information quickly. And it's no wonder that a more subtle version of this is basically ubiquitous in the modern world. Many digital applications, whether on your phone, computer, or television, use small sound bites to communicate or reinforce information. Like, for example, that sound of typing on a touchscreen keyboard, basically trying to mimic the sound of a real keyboard. Or a high-pitched sound when you try to perform an operation on a frozen computer, alerting you that it's better to wait a bit. Brands like streaming services use small sound bites as auditory representations of their brands that you might recognize without me even mentioning which brand it is. These small sound bites can convey information in a very subtle way. Before this video, I had never stopped to think about how much my brain associates sounds with specific things without me noticing. These useful audio snippets are called earcons. A mix of ear with the word icons. One of the main uses of earcons is to create audio interfaces to facilitate the use of digital devices for people with vision impairments. Just as deleting a file or copying text can be associated with graphic icons, these same functions can be associated with sound icons. For example, the sound of glass breaking is used in some services as an earcon for deleting a file. Earcons can be both more abstract sounds, like a beat in a specific rhythm, or sounds that refer to something specific in the physical world around us. When sounds refer to the world, they are sometimes called auditory icons, but the exact nomenclature is not perfectly determined. Some references use earcons and auditory icons as synonyms. Others add even more categories, such as spearcons, which are earcons that include words.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
Even these short sounds can generate psychological and physiological reactions in the same way as music. An alarm like the header of the American security system, which, to remind you, is this sound. It is an earcon that aims to catch your attention. And now I can finally explain why it might not be an ideal alarm. When a national emergency alarm sounds, the people who hear this signal will be going about their lives normally. And some of them will be performing dangerous tasks, such as operating heavy machinery, driving trucks, or working with electrical networks. If the alarm is too good at catching attention, it may distract these people from their tasks, and this can cause accidents. If, for example, a truck has a serious accident, it can hinder an evacuation order that comes with an emergency alert. A 2022 study showed that more abstract sound warnings can impair short-term spatial memory tasks, which are important for operating heavy machinery. Moreover, abstract sounds like beeps and hisses are harder to correctly identify when someone is focused on another task. In comparison, a more musical sound that starts low and increases in intensity seems to improve quick response capability without causing much distraction, which seems good for an alert. But on the other hand, a more musical sound is easier to ignore, which may cause the alert not to be taken as seriously. So, the nature and progression of the sound can have effects that influence everything from how quickly the alert signal is identified to how people react and how much they are distracted from the tasks they are currently doing. And we haven't even talked about the irritability of the sound yet. A sound that irritates you can first cause a more emotional than rational response, making it difficult to make the immediate decision that an emergency sometimes requires. On the other hand, if the sound is so pleasant that you enjoy listening to it, you might not take the emergency as seriously. Another factor to consider is the familiarity of the sound. An experiment with truck drivers in Sweden showed that familiar sounds are more easily recognized and cause less irritation when used as alarms. But at the same time, these sounds are more easily ignored and minimized by the drivers. So, overly familiar sounds can end up becoming background noise instead of perceived signals. There is a true ocean of possible psychological and physiological reactions to the most diverse sounds. And only now are we beginning to truly explore the depth and utility of this sonic ocean. Somewhere in this spectrum of excitement and irritation, there are sounds that would be the perfect alarms that alert without distracting, indicate danger without irritating, and inform without being ignored. And yes, the effect of a better alarm may be minimal, but warning signals will affect thousands or millions of people over the course of their use. Even minimal effects will be felt on these scales by at least some individuals. Choosing the right sound can even save lives. The problem is that we still don't know what that sound is. Most of the research investigating more deeply the effects of alarms and sound warnings is very recent. And there is much to be investigated about what exactly is the ideal balance between attracting attention without distracting, irritating without bothering, and being familiar enough to be remembered, but not enough to be ignored. To make this even clearer, the perfect sound for an alarm has not yet been found. Anatel, the National Telecommunications Agency in Brazil, is starting to study the use of sound alerts sent to cell phones for natural disaster cases. The agency has even chosen a sound for the cell phone to play in case of weather alerts, which, by the way, I will not play in this video because familiarity with the sound can affect how serious the alert is perceived. The sound that Anatel chose is closer to being an alarm, like the one I showed at the beginning of this video, rather than this hypothetical ideal alarm that balances natural and artificial sounds. And this is on purpose. Classic alerts like these are already familiar and have been tested enough. It doesn't make sense to abandon what works before we are sure of what the perfect alarm sound would be. Research on what constitutes an ideal alarm is still ongoing. And there is much to be learned about what the ideal characteristics for an alert sound are. So for now, these are the sounds that were made to catch your attention. All right, that's more than enough. Thank you very much and see you next time.